Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Dean of the arduous School of Business and Economics, Dean Gilliard.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the 36th Annual Economic Forecast hosted by our partner, Bank of America. My name is Reggie Gilliard. I'm the Dean of the George L. Arduous School of Business and Economics, and it's my privilege to be here with you today. We're proud to be back here at the Sagerstrom Center for the 7th straight year. Before we get started, I do want to mention our next conference, the Forecast Update. The Forecast Update is scheduled for June 19th, right here at the Sagerstrom Center for the Arts. Please mark your calendars. Now let's get things started by recognizing the Chapman University dignitaries who are with us here today. Please help me to extend a warm welcome to the following distinguished guests, but please hold your applause until the end. First, we'd like to welcome the Chapman University alumni, including members of our Alumni Association Board and members of the Chapman 50 Alumni Leadership Group. We're also pleased to have with us today members of the Chapman University Endowment Council and also members of the Arduous School Board of Counselors and Corporate Partners. And finally, we're very excited to have members of the Chapman University Board of Trustees, Board of Governors, and members of the President's Cabinet. With the groups that I just mentioned, please stand and accept our thanks for all that you do for Orange County's finest private university. Please stand. So we gather twice a year for the economic forecasts, and all the proceeds directly benefit Chapman University's Student Scholarship Fund. So thank you all. Over the past 36 years, with your help, we've raised over $2 million at our economic conferences. Through your help, our students are able to continue their dreams of a higher education. On behalf of tomorrow's leaders, we thank you all for your support. And now, on behalf of Chapman University, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our sponsor, Bank of America, for hosting today's conference and also the post-conference reception. As you all know, the economic forecast has become a tradition in Orange County, and we certainly couldn't do it without our sponsors. I'd like to thank each of our sponsors for their generous support. Please again, wait until the end for your applause. We'd like to thank our platinum sponsor, Rattan & Tucker, our gold sponsors, the Arduous Family Foundation, the Cornelius Family Trust, and Gemini Industries, our silver sponsor, Schools First Credit Union, and our bronze sponsors, Abacus, Advanced MP Technology, Automobile Club of Southern California, First American Financial Corporation, InfoSend, James B. Rozak, Massimo, Signature Insurance Group, Westport Capital Partners, and the UBS Baldwin Naples Wealth Management Group. We're also grateful for support from our media sponsors, the Daily Pilot, OC Metro, and the Orange County Business Journal. We're very thankful to have such extensive support, and we appreciate your involvement. Please give all of our sponsors a big round of applause. So now I'd like to introduce and recognize the company that's made today's event, our partner, Bank of America. In the 14th year that Bank of America has joined us, it's truly been a great partnership. We're proud to have Bank of America as the title sponsor for both economic conferences. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're honored to have Mr. Alan Staff with us, representing Bank of America. Mr. Staff is the Market President for Bank of America Orange County. And as Market President, Mr. Staff is the Senior Executive for local businesses and also leads their civic and philanthropic activities in Orange County. He serves as the company's local enterprise leader for 6,000 Orange County associates who deliver a wide range of global financial services to both individuals and also businesses. Mr. Staff also has 25 years of experience with Bank of America's commercial real estate and home building lending group. He serves as regional executive for commercial real estate banking, where he leads the bank's multi-billion-dollar commercial real estate portfolio. Mr. Staff is also a dedicated leader and coach in community youth sports, to include football, baseball, and soccer. And now I'd like to invite Alan to come forward and accept a token of our appreciation and to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alan Staff.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and U.S. Trust, I would like to thank Chapman University, Dr. Jim Doti, Dr. Essie Adibi for the leadership in this important research. Partnering with the university on its economic update and forecast for the last several years has been a pleasure and a privilege, and we are proud to continue that support. For over 100 years, Bank of America has been proud to connect Orange County entrepreneurs to resources, enabling them to grow from a small business to a global brand, and providing sound investment guidance to our clients so that they can secure their personal financial future. We have a role to ensure our customers make better financial decisions. To address these needs of our community and connect people with tools and resources to help improve their financial lives, Bank of America entered into a partnership with Sal Khan and the Khan Academy to deliver a free financial education program. This program is delivered through online videos which are easy to understand and were created in partnership with entrepreneur and innovator Sal Khan and the Khan Academy, and it's titled BetterMoneyHabits.com. Just as Bank of America is investing in the future of our Orange County community, so is Chapman University as they expand their campus to connect their students to resources, empowering them to be competitive in a global economy. For example, Chapman University is addressing the rapidly changing healthcare industry with the recent announcement of a new health science campus. To quote Sal Khan, "Don't talk about stuff, do it. When your organization is paused, and when the spirit of just seeing what happens dies, that is when you should be worried. At the end of the day, what matters is whether your product works and whether people like it." I find a great similarity in the entrepreneurial vision of Sal Khan and Chapman's president, Dr. Jim Doti. Jim listens to the needs of the community and helps narrow the educational gap, as there never seems to be a pause in the innovative developments of Chapman. I would also say the product of a Chapman University is working as evidenced by the U.S. News and World Report ranking of Chapman as number 7 in the Western region. Jim has an incredible ability to connect the needs of the community to future campus projects, thus making Chapman University a campus created by the Orange County community. I look forward to hearing Jim and Essie connect us to the university's latest findings on the economy and its expected trends in 2014 and beyond. I especially look forward to the opportunities that Chapman University students and future leaders will bring as they continue to connect with their communities in the future. As we like to say at Bank of America, life is better when we are connected. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the president of Chapman University, Dr. Jim Doti.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 36th Annual Forecast Conference. Alan and Bank of America, thank you very much for being our lead sponsor. We've had a long partnership with B of A. In fact, C.C. Chapman, the man for whom our university is named, was buddies with A.P. Giannini probably 100 years ago. I want to thank all of our silver, bronze, and gold sponsors. And one of those, I like to call him our platinum sponsor, Paul Musco, is here in the audience somewhere. I just had lunch with him and his guests and had a great plate of rigatoni alla Musco, which is at Antonella's restaurant, their signature dish. So I am in a great mood. This is going to be a very positive for it. Just give me a little pasta and I am raring to go. But speaking of the devil, I'm very excited to give you an update on our Musco Center for the Arts. It is now under construction. There's a view of its facade, and not bad, huh? Wonderful facility that we hope will be completed soon. It's one of the largest venues, performing arts venues for any private university in the country. I could just take an example. I don't know, like USC, for example. Their wonderful Bing Theater, the small Bing Theater, has 550 seats, which is roughly 1/2 of our Musco Center for the Arts, 1,100 capacity. But speaking of USC, I have to tell you, something happened over the summer that I just can't wait to share with you. I consider this a miracle. I think you'll agree when you see this. I was in the Red Ride bike trek across Iowa. Here in that left photo is with Mahmoud Razai, a graduate of Chapman, former student of mine. He's a bronze sponsor and founder of a great company, InfoSend. He convinced me to go on this bike ride, and the tradition is you put your back tire in the Missouri River, and then 500 miles later, about a week later of riding, you dip your front tire in the Mississippi. Basically, you trek through Iowa. Crazy thing. In the middle of this race, like, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday, I don't know, you're riding, this was maybe a 100-mile day. It was a long day, I remember that. It had to be 100 degrees. The humidity was in the stratosphere. And the one thing you're looking forward to as you're riding is when you get into your campsite, where tents, you sleep in tents, they have these showers in semi-trailers, and you're thinking, oh, man, I can't wait to take a shower and riding. And I got into camp. I was so bedraggled, and the heat, and I'm kind of just wearily walking along to get into this long line to get into the showers. And I get up there, and with my head down, and I look up, and there, the guy in front of me, and you see his bag. Honest to God, this is what I saw, and I'm not kidding you here. This is no joke. This is a miracle. I thought I was hallucinating. These are the shirts we gave out free at our update forecast back in June in honor of our victory over, I think, our 8th in a row victory in lacrosse, USC. Can you imagine the probability? 12,000 people are in this, 12,000 nutcases are riding through Iowa. And I happen to stand in back of a guy who's wearing this shirt. It turns out it's none other than my buddy Greg Edwards. This is waiting in the porta potty line in the morning, probably 5:30 in the morning. Greg, are you in the audience? I think your son is with you. Greg, are you somewhere? If you want to ask him about it, there he is, Greg and Greg Jr. Greg Jr. is a graduate of Chapman. He's so smart, he didn't go on Red Ride. His dumb father did. By the way, he is also a member of our Center for Economic Research Advisory Board. So you can see that one of the criteria for being on the board is you have to be shorter than I am. One of the requirements. But forget about Caltech, USC, bigger fish to fry, namely Caltech. I'm very pleased to say that a recent rating of top institutions in the area of experimental economics, the Archer School, #1. #2, my alma mater, University of Chicago. And then I looked at the next 100. I picked out all the California publics and privates. And here they are. A number of UC schools, Stanford, Caltech, and that's it with the Archer School, #1. Now, I'm now going to be moving into our forecast accuracy. I will bet any money, I haven't checked this out, and I will lay any money on the line that our forecast accuracy was better than any of these schools. We had a great year. These are forecasts for real GDP, which you're going to see in my presentation. The focus is going to be on where real GDP growth is going. That's how you diagnose the overall health of the economy. That's consumer, investment, government spending, and net exports. This is the forecast for each of these years that we presented in December of the prior year, or last year for the first time we forecasted in November of the prior year. So these were our forecasts for each of those 5 years, and here are the actuals for those 5 years. Pretty much right on. By the way, if you looked at the Fed forecast, the Federal Reserve Board forecast, which are a month later after Chapman, either in January or now in December, they've been roughly about 0.5% higher than we've been, sometimes even a full percent higher. Chapman has been a more pessimistic forecaster in terms of our forecasts, but as you can see, we've been right on. This year, 13, that is back in last November, in 2012, our quarterly forecasts for real GDP were the following. As you can see, and we include 12/4, just as we don't know. We don't have fourth quarter real GDP data. We're just getting in the final revisions on the third quarter. We don't have the fourth quarter, so you have a fourth quarter, and this was our forecast. If you check out your review of last November, this is what it would show, and here's the actual. Not bad. If you look at interest rates, probably our best year ever in interest rate. We had 3 or 4 bullseyes. We called the fact that federal funds, short-term rates would stay about the same, but we also called, at least year to year, mid-year on average, the 50 basis point increase. And almost, you can see here's the actual forecast. AAA 4.3, 4.3, and Treasury bond, very important, 10-year 2.3, 2.4, within a few basis points. So as you can see, our interest rate forecast, it doesn't get any better than that. Well, this is the model that we're now using to forecast this next year. It gives you at least a basis for where we've been, and allows us to now move on to our forecast. I will be covering the U.S. My colleague and former student, Chapman grad, S.A. Beebe, will be covering the Orange County and California forecast. But looking at the current recovery following the Great Recession back in 2009, we have had 51 continuing months of recovery. So something like 4+ years of recovery in this forecast. This index from 100 to 110 basically tells us that real GDP now, 51 months later, is 10% greater than it was when the recovery started. Now comparing that to other recession recoveries that followed serious, deep recessions, we have 83 and 75, over 120, 51 quarters later. So as you can see, our recovery has been less than half the normal growth you have following a recessionary period. That's not news to you. You all know that this has been a middling, slow recovery. But there's some positives to that. Unlike 83 and 75, where 51 months later, they were already beginning. The economy was already beginning to see some pressure. Interest rates started moving up. You also had a situation where you were reaching what economists call full employment. So you were moving against capacity, which means that recovery was running out of steam. Our current recovery, being weaker, still has some legs. In fact, if you look at some of the measures of capacity, no signs of inflationary pressure. In fact, the problem is just the opposite. I think most analysts are worried about deflation, not inflation. Larry Summers recently, just this weekend, gave a talk where we're really worried about deflation, not the long-term Japanese deflation. You can see the personal consumption, less food and energy, that's what the Fed looks at, by the way, very carefully, is less than 2%, as is the CPI. And in spite of 4+ years of recovery, inflation is still very, very low. If you look at unemployment, you see more of the same. Unemployment is now dropped from around 10% to 7.3%. Full employment, at the very least, is considered 5.5%. So we're still pretty far from what would be perceived as close to a full employment economy. But that 7.3%, I think, is somewhat of an anomaly. It's artificially low. Realistically, the unemployment rate is higher, and you can see that here in this graph that shows the labor force participation rate. This is the percentage of people aged 16 to 64 who are working. And the percentage has dropped during this time from 66% down to 63%. Now you may think, well, it's only a 3% drop. First of all, it shouldn't be dropping during a recovery, it should be increasing. This is dropping possibly because of demographic factors, but more importantly, because some people have simply given up looking for a job. And if you're in the survey and you say, I'm not looking for a job right now, even though I'm unemployed, you're not in that 7.3% unemployment rate. You're just not counted like a non-person. If that drop, by the way, from 66 to 63%, if you convert it into workers, that's a decline of 8 million workers. That 3 percentage point drop. So 8 million either dropping out because of demographic changes, that they moved into retirement years, or more likely, they've given up looking for a job. The bottom line here is that on the labor side, no pressure here against available resources, even though we're now 4+ years into the recovery. Well, where does that place us in terms of monetary and fiscal policy? Monetary policy, as you know, has been very expansionary since the beginning of the recovery. At the initial stages, it was just to keep banks alive. But even this last year, we've continued with QE3 and QE4. That translates down to $85 billion of purchases on the part of the Fed for mortgages, mortgage bonds, and also government bonds, increasingly long-term government bonds. This Fed assets from 2.8 trillion to 3.8 trillion, that 1 trillion increase, that's the multiply. 85 billion times 12, you get $1 trillion increase in assets. Those are Federal Reserve Board assets. Bonds, mortgage bonds and U.S. bonds that they've added, and now close to $4 trillion. When the recovery started, the assets of the Fed were about $1 trillion. But they added $3 trillion to its assets. And what you see on the asset side, of course, is on the liability side, which are mainly deposits with the Federal Reserve Board from financial institutions, mainly banks. Now the question is, what is the Fed going to do? We are projecting that the Fed very soon, as soon as December, more likely early next year, will announce a cutback in its bond purchase program, the QE3, QA4, from 85 billion and probably a phased reduction. You're thinking by the end of the year, neutral to zero. Janet Yellen, a dove, will probably prolong it more than someone else would have, but remember, it's a Federal Reserve Board decision. These are open market operations. So we believe somewhere, some way, the Federal Reserve Board policy out there is going to move from an expansionary, a very sharp expansionary policy, to either a neutral or a much less expansionary policy. Either way you put it, the Federal Reserve, at least in terms of policy, will have a more contractionary policy than what we had this year. And most likely it will cause long-term interest rates to go up, and I'll talk about our interest rate forecast in just a few minutes. But right now, in terms of this story about real GDP, we're dealing with a Federal Reserve that next year will turn more contractionary, and we're not going to have this $85 billion infusion of liquidity into the marketplace, which, by the way, we feel has also helped the stock market reach its recent highs. What about fiscal policy? Whether you know it or not, this year, 2013, fiscal policy has been very contractionary. Tax increases early this year, spending cutbacks, translated to a drop in the deficit, which you may think of as good news. In the long run, it is good news. In the short run, however, it's less spending, which is an issue with respect to real GDP. Less spending is less real GDP. And that was like $400+ billion. So it became very, very contractionary. This next year, we expect that trend to continue, less contractionary, but nonetheless, there will be less spending, higher taxes as a result of the lagged effects of the tax increases of $120 billion. So in the real GDP scorecard, we start off with a bogey. We're in the hole, $120 billion that we have to make up with other forms of spending. Well, let's start with net exports, for example. Net exports will benefit from the fact that the US dollar has declined in value vis-a-vis other currencies, which will help our exports increase and reduce our imports from whatever they are. When you have an increase in exports, drop in imports, that improves your net export position, which is part of real GDP. And we're estimating it's going to go from around $413 billion deficit, that's our net export position, to $390 negative. But going from a bigger negative to a smaller negative is actually a turnaround in spending of plus $23 billion. So we've made up for some of that decline on the fiscal side. Let's move on into housing. And I can go on and on with all kinds of measures which will simply buttress what I'm going to tell you now. But you can read about it in the review. There are more graphs there that present this. But I'm going to go right to what I consider the most important of all of these graphs, the most telling, the most compelling in terms of where we are. I'm an economist. I believe in supply and demand. When we had this huge foreclosure overhang and unsold housing overhang and excess inventory of homes, we said things were getting better. Even though Gary Schilling, a prominent economist, was a doomsdayer, calling for another big, sharp drop in appreciation, which never happened. And it never happened because we saw demand greater than supply. Look at this, between 04 and 08, the black, which is housing starts, is supply. That's the additional housing entering the market. Whereas the blue and red bars are demand. Demand in the form of new households buying homes, and the red replacement housing. So you could see that between 04 and 08, except for 05, supply was greater than demand. That led us back then to begin forecasting a drop in housing prices and a big drop in construction. But then when the recovery started, we saw that demand was much higher than supply. To now, in 13, it's the biggest gap it's ever been. More than 500,000 units. And as a result of that, we believe that this will be another good year in terms of housing construction, as shown in this graph. We're now expecting to move from first of all, look at between 12 and 13, look at that, it was 18.6%. But we see a similar kind of increase now in 2014 to roughly 1.1 million units. Units being apartments, condos, townhomes, and single family. And that increase of roughly 150,000 additional units being constructed translates to, in dollar terms, $35 billion. So from the housing side of the equation, I'll talk about prices later, on the housing construction side, we see plus $35 billion. But you know, housing is only part of, in the category of CIG, net exports, it's part of investment. But in addition to housing, there's commercial construction and business investment. And on the commercial side, it's looking pretty good. Not as strong as housing, mind you, but still strong. As you can see here, this is Green Street Advisor, proprietary data. We have Chapman graduates that work for Green Street. Thankfully, we were able to get these data, and I'm able to share it with you. But as you can see, prices on the commercial side are now the highest level they have ever been. Vacancy rates now are in the low double digits, falling. So we see national, U.S., Essie will talk more about Orange County and California later, but nationally we see about 5%. On the business and plan side, this shows the ISM Purchasing Managers Index, which is basically a confidence measure for manufacturers. And as you can see recently, there's been a sharp increase from 50 to about 57, which augurs well for business and plan investment, about 5%. And when you add that together, you're talking about plus $108 billion of additional spending, plant and equipment, and commercial construction. So as you can see, we kind of cut into that bogey at the beginning from the fiscal side, which, by the way, is kind of a repeat of what happened this year. We had this huge fiscal drag, short-run drag, because of the deficit declining. Remember the $400+ billion, which was made up for in other types of spending. In this case, when you sum this up, you get plus $46 billion. So that's where we are in the story now, $46 billion. Now, in an economy with a real GDP of $16 trillion, this is minuscule. It's like 0.3%. Hardly anything to think about. Basically no growth. But there's one form or type of spending we haven't talked about, and that is consumer spending. Actually, the big gorilla, roughly 2/3 of the total. Now, if you remember your principles of economics, remember Keynesian theory, consumer spending is a function of income, disposable income. But more recently, you realize that consumer spending is also a function of your perception of your wealth, how wealthy you are. Not income, but what's the value of your home, your financial assets? Well, let's look at that. Let's look at the value of a home. Here's single-family home prices, which peaked at $227.6 thousand. Of course, this is U.S., not Orange County data. Great recession, and notice that it's picked up not to the 227, but above 200,000. Nice increase, and notice that this last year, doesn't show it there, but that's an 11% increase in home prices this year. Very sharp increase in home prices, which obviously makes people feel wealthy. Now, if you look at your portfolio, your net worth, and if you look on the asset side, you're going to find that on average, 20% is made up of home value, the net value of your home. The other 80% is financial assets. Well, there the story is even better. If you look at the S&P 500, I looked at it this morning. When I looked at it, it was 1805, so it's higher than 1796. Dow Jones is like 16,105. This year, roughly, there's been with not counting dividends, just appreciation, roughly a 25% increase to the current period. This has been the highest increase in the stock market since 1997, so the highest increase in this 21st century. Obviously, that adds to wealth, and that's why household net worth is now nominal, or even if you adjust for inflation, is now at its highest level it's ever been. So at least on the wealth side, that's going to make people feel better about consumer spending. But remember, it's also a function of income, disposable income. And before you spend, you have to use part of the disposable income to pay your debts. And that's looking good. If you take household debt service payments as a share of disposable income, it's the lowest it's been in 50 years, which gives people the wherewithal to spend. Now, it's not all good. Employment growth has been lackluster. Unemployment is still high. As I will be talking about in a minute, interest rates have already increased, long-term rates 100 basis points, and we're expecting them to go higher. But when you put it all together in our equation, we are forecasting for consumer spending about 2.1%. As you can see, more of the same. It's pretty much what we've had since the recovery started in 2009. If you translate the 2.1% into dollar terms and go back to our scorecard, as you can see, it's $228 billion. I thought it was a big amount. And if you sum it up, that's $274 billion. We've now covered it all. Consumer, investment, government, net exports. 274 translates to 2.2% growth. So if you're looking for an exciting forecast, like a double dip finally, the first year will have major growth in income that will increase employment and bring down unemployment, we are not seeing that. We're, again, one of the more pessimistic out there. I think the Fed, their forecast will come out in about a month, but I wouldn't be surprised if they say 2.5, 2 3/4. Other forecasters are out there 3+. But we see 2.2% in terms of the rationale that I just presented. What does that mean in other areas? Well, interest rates, we don't see short rates changing very much. They'll stay very low, close to zero. But long-term rates, interestingly, now around 2.7, and looking at the 10-year T-bond, will go up another 100 basis points. When I say another, remember when Brent Bernanke started hinting back in the summer that the bond buying program of $85 billion is not going to last forever, and it caused haywire. And interest rates shot up, they came down a little bit, but basically they're 100 basis points higher than they were mid-year. And we see that because of this announcement, this pending announcement that will happen early next year, that the bond buying prime program will be cut back, we see that overall pressure will be 100 basis points higher. Now, it might happen. Let's say the announcement is in February, and the Fed, Janet Yellen, they announced that it's going to go to zero by March, a draconian shift. It spooks markets. It could go 200 basis points higher, 250 basis points higher. Maybe the change will be such where the market has already discounted and no change. Whatever happens during that period of excitement, we think ultimately market forces over the year will take over, and we see pressure of an additional 100 basis points. Housing affordability has dropped sharply, and it relates to the graph I just showed. That 100 basis point increase in long-term rates, that's the 10-year rate. Mortgage rates went up even more, 150 basis points. That caused, along with an 11% increase in appreciation, caused a sharp drop in housing affordability. Both things. Higher housing prices, higher interest rates. Housing isn't as affordable as it was 6 months ago. And notice it dropped to 160, which basically means that median family income is 60% higher than what's necessary to buy a median priced home. But if you think that, or if you agree with us that mortgage rates are going to go up another 100 basis points to the 3.7, that means that everything else being the same, that'll drop to about 150, maybe 145. Still higher than this long-term average of 120 to 140. So in relative terms, housing will still be more affordable than it has been historically, even with another 100 basis point increase in mortgage rates. And if that happens, our forecast calls for 3.1% increase in housing appreciation. Now notice that that's a national statistic. Housing is very regional in nature, very regional. When the balloon burst, the bubble burst, we had Florida, Arizona, Vegas, Nevada, and California bearing the brunt of that, and they've come out the most in terms of recovery, not surprisingly. But overall, U.S. average, we're seeing a big drop in appreciation, but nonetheless, appreciation that will be higher than the rate of inflation, which means real growth in housing prices. I'm going to conclude with this stock market. We don't forecast the market, so I approach this subject tenderly. But if you begin looking at fundamentals, things that are going into what Robert Schuller, who also has another Schiller index, which is much higher, it's more complicated. I'm just going to cover this one. He's now in this yellow zone in his PE ratio. This long run average from 90 on is 13.7. The most recent is 15.1. So most people who look at PE think, well, 15.1, 13.7, that's not too bad. But notice this is the forward price earnings. Forward in terms of profits. Analysts anticipate what profits will be. Do you know what they're expecting? I mean, the analysts tend to be on the irrational exuberance side. 9.2% this next year. So this is discounting for a 9.2% upward swing in profits. In an economy that's growing at around 2%, it's tough to figure. So if it's not 9, but 6 or 4 or something lower, all of a sudden this PE of 15.2 based on 9% earnings growth could be 18, could be 20. From the yellow zone closer to the red zone. So what this would argue is that as optimistic as we've been about the market the last few years, this is sending out a warning signal to maybe lighten up a bit. We don't forecast the market, but we're certainly not seeing in fundamentals that it's a great buying opportunity anymore. But if you're on the irrational exuberance side and you want to invest in the market, I've got a great reason for you to do it. Nobody else has seen this. It's because of my interest in political history. I uncovered something. This is something I thought, okay, we're going into the second year of Obama presidency. So what happens in the second term of a second-year president? Believe it or not, every time, without exception, the market has gone up double digits. Now why? I don't have a clue. Not a clue. But it's pretty, amazing that you've had all of these double-digit increases. And with an average at 20%. So if you are a sunspot theorist, go for it. But if you believe in fundamentals, you might prudently begin getting a little nervous right now. Now, before I conclude, I'm into much more important material here. I don't know how many of you know, I was on the Emmy Award-winning, more Emmys than any other show, Bold and Beautiful. Amazing that not only was I on once, but a few months I was on again. Now let me tell you what happened the first time, very quickly. I get on the show, they give me my lines. Basically what's happening, I'm a CFO, they call me Chapman. His name is Mr. Chapman on the show. I sit down with the CEO, some young stud, good-looking guy, and he can't wait to get me out of the office because he's got his love interest, his current love interest, who's coming in. So we go through some silly banter, I kowtow to him, he gets me up, I get out, and his current love of the day shows up, and that's the city. So I'm in that, and I want a meteor role here. So I get notified that if I could get 5,000 hits on YouTube, they'll invite me back for a second appearance on B&B. Casey, are you out there? Casey Casper? He's my producer. He's a Chapman grad. He got me on the show. Stand up. Thank him for getting me on. Making me a stroke star. He's getting all of us CFOs out there, financial types, prospects for starring role. Anyway, I'm invited back again. I told him I want a media role. The same thing happened. I'm like being typecast. And I'm going to show you the scenes through the miracle of single frame digital reproduction. This is the show. Here I am talking. I'm kowtowing to him. He's telling me what to do, get this report done. And then, of course, just like the last time, he gets up, the shake, that's get out of here. They say, okay, Chapman, that was great. Get the report done. I'll see you. For me to get out. He doesn't even call me Mr. Chapman. Just Chapman. No respect at all. And then the next scene is we look over and his latest girlfriend appears at the door. My signal to get out of there. Now watch this. This is through this miracle of looking at each frame, I was able to detect certain things of great interest. Okay, she walks in, lovely actress, Lindsay Godfrey is her name. But notice something. She's looking at me. She's not looking at this young, good-looking star that the script calls for her to see. She's checking me out. No question about it. Now, you may think that's unrealistic. Who knows? Maybe she has an interest for an old guy with gray thinning hair. Anything is possible. But if you don't believe that, you think I'm exaggerating or seeing things that nobody else is seeing, here's the next scene that we captured. Okay. Unfortunately, Jacob is right in my way. You can't see me, but I was able to send to our Dodge College of Film and Television, to their animation museum. They have this special heat-sensitive transfer system where they can figure out, it's amazing what technology is doing, that they could detect exactly where I stood at that point in the shot. Notice again, this is even more clear. She's really staring at me now. Of course, even though she's showing obvious interest in carrying on some kind of a romance here, we have to follow the script, right, Casey? I have to leave, she has to come in, and the next scene, not surprisingly, and to my great disappointment, is this scene. Now, do you understand what we're talking about here? That could have been me. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been a somebody. Instead of some bum from Palookaville. Do you know I've been waiting my entire life to say that Marlon Brando line? I feel now like my life has been fulfilled now that I got it out of my system. But I could have been a contender. That could have been me, but I still have a chance. I got this email from Casey. Hello, President Doti. Congrats. You made it to 10,000. This is the second one. 2 months, I got 10,000 hits. My people will be calling your people. I haven't got that call yet. I think we may need, Casey, more than 10,000 hits, so please, Google. All you need to do is Jim Doti return visit. Don't even B&B, just Jim Doti return visit. This is what will come up. Hit that. You don't even have to watch the video, the 2-minute video. Just hit. In fact, you could stay there all day and just hit that. And if you do, you're not just supporting Jim Doti, you're supporting all the financial, the CFOs of this world who want to have the first CFO romantic lead on stage, screen, or television. It's all up to you. It's now my time to introduce my colleague, SADV. Now, I don't know how many of you were here last year, but I was Googling, I needed a photo of Essie. So I Googled it, a million photos. I don't know, one of his good friends must have, as a joke, put in, it was a photo of Essie's face in a urinal screen. And since I showed that, just like I had these 10,000 hits, there have been 9,000 people who have purchased this Essie urinal screen. So it was a big hit out there. So much of a hit, and this is perfect timing for the holiday season. It is now available in decorator colors. What better stocking stuffer for your loved ones? Kidding aside, ladies and gentlemen, I am so proud of Essie, not only Chapman grad, but my former student. Just recently, the National Association of Business Economists had placed them on, it was a big deal, their forecasting panel. So here he is, my student and Chapman graduate, SAT.
Should I thank him for this? Thank you very much. But, you know, I want to tell you really something honestly. The 9,000 sale, he bought them all. And I think it was good. The money went for good cause. You notice he said what? It was bike riding in Iowa. You know what they do? Greg, sorry, I'm going to reveal the secret. Somebody carries their bike and they go from town to town drinking. Actually, the money we made from that sale went to Bailey Mount from the jail. Look at how he's crying. Okay, I'm going to have 30 minutes. Actually, maybe I can do it in 25. What I want to talk about is basically there are 4 components that I want to mention. Jobs in California, Orange County. Second, consumer spending. Third, home prices. Fourth, thanks to our new dean, which I'm going to blame you for it. He asked me to develop a model to forecast healthcare employment in California. And then you can imagine when I agreed to do it, I didn't know anything about the ACA, Affordable Care Act, and I had to blend that in. So I'm going to do all of this in 25 minutes. So, a little history. This is GDP of California. Starting from 100 here index 2007, it went down 5.5%, huge drop. And then it made a recovery, you can see. By the end of 2012, we didn't regain everything that we lost, you notice that. Now, into the 13, we regained some of it. Now, when you put employment against this, the picture is really dismal. Employment peak was here, 2007, went down 8.2%. Made a recovery, but still we have 5.1% less than that peak employment we had in 2007. When you look at this, if you have a curious mind, you say, what's going on? How could you produce relatively same amount of goods and services with less workers? 2 things happen. One is outsourcing. The second is employers learn to squeeze more out of their existing workers. So they're not hiring any more people. Now, this is California. Let's put it against Orange County and US. See what happened. This is the impact of recession. US, job drop. California, Orange County. And you notice Orange County got hit much harder. Why? Because in addition to construction, which disappeared, mortgage industry really hit us hard. Now, when we made the recovery, we were underperforming, except 2012, that for the first time, Orange County did better than California, and California did better than the US. 2012 actually was a very good year for everybody in the country. If you break down all the states, every state added job during 2012. You can see the fastest growing area, you're not surprised, right? North Dakota, it's all oil, fracking. Then you can see Montana benefited the same, oil, natural resources. Colorado, natural resources and technology, natural resources. Utah and Arizona, very mixed. They gain almost in every sector. We're here, and nobody knows about Indiana and Kentucky. We don't know really what happened. But you can explain what happened. The base is so small, a little pickup. translate to fast forward. Now, let me say it's all about construction. This is what really hit us hard, and this is what it's going to pull us out. If you look at construction spending, this is California, look at the huge drop here, 36%. And these are on the top of this, top of that. And then we make recovery, and look at 2012. That's where construction spending grew by about 15%. And that's why 2012 was good. Now what's happening in 13, at least what we have up to the third quarter, increase of 24% year over year in real construction spending, adjusted for inflation. So it's not surprising when you look at Orange County, look at the fastest growing sector of the economy, construction. In third quarter, year over year, 9.5% increase in employment. That's huge, by the way. And then that's followed by financial activities. And you know what's going on here, right? It was home sales and refinancing that generated that huge increase. The weakest sector, the negative sector here, is government. And that's all federal government, not the state. The state is coming back, and they're higher. Put California against it, almost same picture. Job growth of 4.1%, and leisure hospitality 4.2%. Financial activity didn't do as well because, see, as I mentioned over and over, California is divided into two, not south versus north. It's east versus west. And areas on the eastern part of California, they're not doing as well, whether it's construction spending or mortgage activity. In fact, when you look at unemployment rate, you can see which sectors, which areas have the highest unemployment rate. This is California, 8.7%. Fresno, Inland Empire, Los Angeles. By the way, Los Angeles is getting hit hard, not because of west side of the county, east part, which behaves pretty much like Inland Empire. And then we have Sacramento, and look at Orange County and San Francisco. Our unemployment rate are the best in the state. And when you look at US, we're doing even better than US when it comes to unemployment rate. But again, the emphasis here is the state is doing fine. The state is doing fine, but it is not uniform around the geographical area. So, what's our forecast now? This was all history. Again, we have to look at construction spending. Is this going to continue? Because that's important, obviously. And we believe yes. If you look at the value of the permits that are being drawn, and this is basically what we call building permit valuation, it's going to increase by 28.9% this year and 16.5% next year. In terms of dollar value, 32 billion becomes 41 and then 48. By the way, you notice in all of my graph, I'm going to have 13 and 14 light color because 13 is estimate. We don't have the third quarter yet. In some cases, we don't even have the second quarter. By the way, economists, they love estimate. A friend of mine just moved to a new house. I said, what's your phone number? He gave me an estimate. Worse than that. Worse than that. Another friend of mine, I haven't seen him for a long time. I just saw him recently. I said, how many kids do you have? He said 3 plus or minus 1. We love estimates. So, when I showed you that, maybe I should go back. I showed you all of that, what? The value of the permits. Is this all residential or commercial? Most of it is residential and most of it is multifamily. On the commercial side, we're doing okay, but not really strong. Why? Look at the vacancy rate. Vacancy office in Orange County was 16.7%. It's going to drop to about 12.5% this year, again, estimate, and 11.5% next year. Still double digit. By the way, we don't forecast this. We get this from Voight. Jerry, I guess, is here from Voight that gives us the numbers, and it's consistent with the numbers coming from CBRE, Alex Haley, that produces for us. And then, based on this kind of vacancies, lease rates are firming up, but still, this is not really a healthy, environment to get lots of construction spending on the office market. Nonetheless, because of residential, we're going to see that huge increase. The next factor influencing us is real GDP. Jim mentioned what? Moving from 1.7% to 2.2%. That's good. But more importantly, something that Jim mentioned it, but I want to spend just a couple of seconds on it. We still don't have federal budget. They're going to negotiate this, and supposedly by January 15th, we're going to get it. In all likelihood, there's going to be some cuts in there. There's no question. Now, is this going to hurt California more than other areas? We did some research, and we're kind of lucky here. If you look at the federal spending as a percent of GDP by a state, where does federal money go, basically? If you look at California, it's on a low-risk area. Only 4% of our GDP comes from federal government. Look at the areas that are going to get hit really hard. You can see it here. Maryland, Washington, Virginia, South Carolina, Alabama, Kentucky again, Missouri, and then on the western side is New Mexico. So even if we get a significant cutback on federal spending, relatively speaking, we're not going to be as much hit as the others. Finally, export. That's very important to us. And what happened to export? Made a huge increase. Look at from $27 billion to $42 billion. But look at the recent statistic. Third quarter of 12 up to third quarter of 13. It's hovering between $39 billion to $42 billion. Why isn't it going up? Why there is a hiccup? It's because of our trading partners. Their economy influences us. Who are our biggest trading partner? This is, I'm talking about California. Our biggest trading partner, Mexico, almost 16% of all of our export. Canada, and you can see the list. And the good news here is only Germany is showing up here from Eurozone countries. Now, their economy in 2013, most of them, their economy is weaker than what it was last year. Because of that, the export didn't grow as fast. The good news is for 2014, they're all going to do better, except China, a little softness, Japan, a little softness. But look at Mexico. That's 1.8% increase here. Here, pretty good. Go down here, almost 1%, almost 1.6%. So when you put all of this together, export, real GDP, and construction spending, our job growth, we believe, is going to be about 2.5%, 35,000 job creation. For the state, 2.3%, 332,000. So we're moving in the right direction. By the way, for the journalists that are here, there are 2 or 3 of them that I know they're here, these numbers might get revised upward. Like, I won't be surprised. In February, always they go back and revise the previous year. So this could be 2.1, 2.2, and this could be 2. But nonetheless, the message we're giving, we're moving in the right direction. But again, it's not really strong, it's not robust. One of the journalists, when he was talking to me over the phone, he said, what is the robust? What should we gain? Remember, Orange County used to generate 55,000, 60,000 jobs. That's robust. So we're not there yet. Okay, consumer spending. This is very important. I don't know how many of you know or not, at Chapman, at Anderson Center, we do a consumer sentiment. We do a survey of consumers. We ask them a bunch of questions, we put it together, and we keep track of this index. Look at how dismal the sentiment was. 57, and by the way, everything is relative here. The higher the number, the better. So 57, we hit 100.3 in third quarter of 13. This is a 6-year high. Why? Jim mentioned a few of the factors, so I'm going to repeat it. One factor is what? Job creation kicking in. Second, home prices going up. Third, equity market is doing well. Fourth, gas prices are going down. And all of that, it helps what? Consumer sentiment. And that consumer sentiment improvement impacts spending. So we think consumer spending, even though income is not growing as fast, is going to do better than last year. 6.1%, 5.9%. Honestly, the sentiment in spending is affecting my household. You know, I'm becoming more romantic with my wife. Everywhere we go now, I hold her hand. If I let it go, she starts shopping. She has a very high sentiment. Okay, so I did the job growth. I did the spending, both better next year than this. How about home prices? Is there another bubble? Okay, let's look at a little history here. This is performance of home prices, single family home. You can see it drop It started 07, 08. 09, by the way, was a negative number. And then a jump here, 7.6%. Again, going back down. And now it shows 19.7% year-over-year increase. First, a couple of observations. What was this all about? Why did prices jump up 7.6%? You know why? You remember federal government and the state gave subsidies? $10,000, $8,000, together $18,000. That boosted sales activity, and that pushed the prices higher. If you take that subsidy out, actually the graph would be like this. See, what they do, whenever they give subsidy, they borrow from the future. Second observation, this number is a little bogus. My own price didn't go up. Actually, some statistics show 25%. The reason is, if you remember, do you remember last year I mentioned I spent lots of time on the change in the mix of homes sold. And I'm going to show you a statistic here. This is for September. September of 2012, Orange County. 1,047 homes were sold over $400,000. Under $400,000. And then 559 homes were sold over $700,000. This is last September. Now look at September of this year. By the way, we don't have October yet. When you put September of 2013, you can see the shift. See, on the low end, it's a big drop, 731. On the high end, you see a big increase. So when you take the median, which is the middle of the statistic sample, you see that moves a little higher, just because the mix has changed. I'm not suggesting home prices will go up. All I'm saying is that those huge numbers you hear, 23%, part of it is because of the mix. Now, what's our forecast there? Always we look at demand and supply. Let's look at each one of them very quickly. On the demand side, something that it is very hard to measure is investors' activity. And what was going on last year? Quite a bit of cash flow, right? Even early this year. We think landscape is going to be different now. There are not going to be as many investors. Why? Prices have gone up now. The cap rates are ridiculously low. So you're not going to see much there. Positive is what? Job growth, right? This is real demand. People finding job, buying a home. Third, affordability. Jim mentioned, right? What's going to happen to affordability? Is it still good, but it's not as good as it used to be. The way we measure it here is we look at the percent of income that you need to buy a median price home. If you have a median income and want to buy a median price home, what percent of your income you're going to allocate? This is after tax, by the way. 2012, that number was 27%. Very attractive. Look at lower than this. Much lower than 2006. Now we think this is going to increase, partly because of what? Tourism. Home prices have gone up, and mortgage rates we believe is going to go higher. So that's not, it's still attractive, but it's not coming in as a positive or negative, as you can see, I put it in a flat. Okay, on the supply side, new homes. What's happening there? We're building more. Now, for the economy, it is very good to build homes as a huge multiplier. Look at how many more homes we're going to build. Going from 8.6, that's 8,600, to what? 9,800? But for home prices, building too many homes is not good. It's increasing supply. So I put that in what? Negative trend. How about resale inventory? Resale inventory actually is behaving very strangely. Look at these numbers. These are the number of units that are listed. It was about 14,000 here, as you can see. It went down. It hit about, what, 5,100? Now it's showing the uptick. The current number is 7,200. And this is very strange. Why? Because typically seasonality suggests that as you get closer to September, the inventories go down, not up. Now why is this happening? Two things affect this. One is good, one is bad. What's the good thing? The good thing is distressed properties are shrinking. Look at the notice of default. That's the prelude to foreclose or short sale. And it's dropping significantly. Foreclosed property, trustee schemes, That's shrinking. So we're not going to have that many distressed property. But what we are worried about is behavior of those homeowners that they were underwater. The price of home was below mortgage, and now they recoup the equity. What are they going to do? Are some of them going to sell? And we believe, yes, they will. The reason being, this is statistic, is very interesting. Between 2005 and 2012, if you add all this, 1 million people left California. That's a net out-migration. Now you might say, how could this be possible? California's population is going up, right? Why? These people are leaving, but they're getting international immigration, and they're getting fertility. Kids are being born. Now, if you correlate this with home prices, there's a high correlation. When home prices go down, people don't leave. Home prices go up, they leave. So our worry is, as home prices increase, some people might be tempted to try to sell the property and leave. So in terms of inventory, these two forces, I think it's going to suggest that inventory is going to be through uptick. And that's why I put it here. Not disaster, because you don't have distressed properties. So when you put all of this together, we think home price appreciation is going to decline significantly. This was 23.3, here is 19%. We think that's going to go down and actually flatten about 4.1% year over year. And believe me, when we did this, Jim, myself, our research associates, Lynn Doti, Ramon Sphere, we look at the model. This is a little bit making us nervous. See how it's flattened here? And the reason is because we think mortgage rates are going to get stable there. If for some reason mortgage rates go more than what we think, or if job creation is weaker, this line can go like this. So there is a possibility within a standard error that we have negative number. On an annual basis, this is the forecast we see. For this year, 19.8%, and next year, significant slowdown in the appreciation. Okay, finally, healthcare. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on this, and then maybe we have some room, we can answer your question. When Reggie asked me to do this, I started basically checking the employment numbers in California. How many people do we have in the healthcare industry? And it's very interesting. We have about 1.5 million people that are in healthcare services, working. About 1.3, these are hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, clinics, anything you name it, that provide service. And then social assistant, convalescents, nursing homes. And in terms of manufacturing, we have about 98,000 employed in pharmaceutical and medicine and medical equipment and supplies. So this is our base. We want to project this looking down the road. By the way, we know, all of us we know, with ACA, Affordable Care Act, or not, this is a fast-growing industry. Why? The population, the trending population suggests that. So, ACA and national analysis of that. You know, this thing, guys, is not really a masterpiece of clarity. It's very difficult to understand what the heck is going on. Just to show you how bad it is, we are not here analyzing what? We're not analyzing the overall impact because it's so complicated. We're just focusing on healthcare. But those who have done it, you can see, I'm going to show you the result. Here we go. Heritage Foundation says ACA will decrease employment by 670,000. And then we have Center for American, ACA will increase employment by 400,000. So you can see what a madness it is. And of course, we're not surprised to see two economic groups with what? Two different opinions, right? Usually two economists, they come with 3 opinions. So we're lucky on that. Okay, let me give you a summary. First of all, these are the percentage of people who are uninsured by state. Texas is the highest number of uninsured, 26% of the population. Not the highest number, highest percent. Then California, 20%, national average is 16.7, and all the other states are below. So this number translates to about 7.5 million people who are uninsured. Okay, what are we trying to do with the ACA? Most of you have heard of individual mandate, right? Buy insurance or pay fine. But The biggest story is what most people don't talk about, and that's the second one. And that is expansion of Medicaid, what we call Medicare. The eligibility is going to go to 138% of federal poverty level. And the federal government will pay the first 3 years of all the costs, and no less than 90% hereafter. You know how many people are going to be eligible under this in California? 1.4 million people. And they're going to sign up because there's no out-of-pocket cost. Now, what we got worried when we were studying this, we said, gee, is every state doing it? No. 25 states and District of Columbia are going to do it, the rest opt out. Then we got worried, gee, this might lead to mobility. You know, people are going to go from one state to another just to get this. Thankfully, California and surrounding states, they're all in it. Like Oregon, Washington, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, they're in it, so we don't see as much of that. But this is much bigger story, by the way. It's a big number. Okay, our forecast, my last two charts. From 2014 to 2020, we think there would be 17% increase in healthcare services and social assistance. That's a huge growth, by the way. This is over 6 years. So if you divide it by 3, what's going to be average of 3%? Now, with ACA, if it gets fully implemented, we think growth is going to hit to 25%. So 8% more. 23,000 more workers in this sector per year on average. By the way, we don't see much of it in 2014. You see a little increase. Part of it is because hospitals are under pressure. Medicare, Medicaid, what we call Medicare, and private insurers are cutting payment to hospitals. So they're getting more patients, but less per patient. And at the same time, the number of days per stay in the hospital is shrinking. Used to be 5, it's down to 4. So hospitals are going through consolidation. So you're not going to see a huge increase here, but obviously you see huge increase there. How about the second sector? Pharmaceutical and medical devices. You know, I feel really sorry for medical device makers. Why? First of all, those who use those things, medical devices, artificial, knee, stent, they're typically an age group of 65 or over, which they used to be covered anyway under Medicare. So they're not going to get that much benefit from ACA, but they're going to pay 2.3% of their gross in taxes. And when it comes to employment growth, we see it only what? 10% over 6 years, and it's going to go up only by 5% more over 6 years, less than 1%. So it's only what? 1,000 per year. It's very, very small. So let me summarize. As I'm summarizing, those of you who want to follow our research, check the Facebook page. If you type this and go there, you get all of our update, our press release, summary of the slides, and so forth. But summary, including gyms, what do we see? Slow, steady growth continuing, barring any unexpected event. There would be better job picture, better GDP. The only exception, what we're worried about, and I hope we're not counting on it, the home prices are going to go through what? Significant moderation in appreciation. Now, before I leave, I want to make a confession. This is really dear to my heart. All my life, I had only one regret, that I was not born as Jim Doti. But about 3 weeks ago, that changed. That attitude changed. And that is due to a phone call that I got. And there's a tape. This is only 2 minutes tape. And by the way, Jim is going to be very surprised because he doesn't know. So somebody hold his hand over there. Keep him confined. A phone call I got 3 weeks ago. So please, roll the tape.
Hello, Dr. Davey.
Yes.
Hi, it's Casey from The Bold and the Beautiful. Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need a favor.
Yes, Casey.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm afraid we're going to have to recast the role of Mr. Chapman. Doti's out, you're in.
Gosh, you know I love to do that. but I'm working on the forecast. I'm so busy.
Dr. Doti, I'm prepared to negotiate. We'll send a car service. You'll have your own dressing room. The VIP treatment. And of course, you'll be paid 3 times what Doti was making.
3 times? I'll do it. But I have to meet that actress, Lindsay.
Hello, Desi. Dr. Adibi. So glad you could make it. Thank you. They're ready for you on the set. Let's go. And between you and me, I mean, Doti just does not have the economic expertise that you have. Oh, he's just not believable as a financial advisor.
Well, now that our leadership is stabilized, we can finally move on, but I can't do any long-term planning until I know where we stand.
Well, I think you need a P&L, and also broken down by category, and of course, an economic forecast.
I like short meetings.
Well, in finance, you know, economic forecast is like hello. If it doesn't mean hello, it means goodbye.
You can dream as much as you want. I got her. Well, thank you very much. Jim, come on up. Thank you, guys. By the way, Casey, are you here? Casey, get up. Again, he was fantastic. He got the whole crew for us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Casey. This acting business is very difficult. I'm going to stick with economics. I woke up 3 in the morning and repeated these 4 stupid lines that I had to do. Okay, we're ready for question and answer, please.
Do we have microphones out there, or just raise your hand?
Yeah, over there. Jim. That lady. Please, I see you. Yes.
That's your slide, right?
Just the home prices? Yeah, I'll get that. If somebody else has a question, Jim, you can take that.
Other question, yes. Speak loudly so everybody can hear you. Yeah, I don't, the question is, there's another California bond issue that's being proposed relating to water. Do you know about that particular?
Yeah, I know a little bit. Of course, we have Tom Campbell here, our former finance director under Mr. Schwarzenegger, so you have more expertise here. I believe, we obviously our infrastructure is in horrible shape. And unfortunately, we have surpluses right now. Don't worry, we have lots of money. When it comes to the state, thanks to taxes, actually they revised it by $2 billion now. They actually surplus. What we should do, use that kind of money, pay down debt, and address our infrastructure. There's no question. We have serious water shortages in this state, and it's going to catch us, in terms of higher rate and conservation. So I have no problem with it. And those are the kind of good borrowing that you can do to enhance and make the state more productive. Unfortunately, you can't keep on borrowing those, pile up debt, and at the same time increase operating expenditure. Do you agree, Tom?
Yeah, I think politically it's going to happen while the legislature is controlled.
Both, exactly, Democrat. In all likelihood, Tom is agreeing that it's going to happen. Can I go back to home prices? Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, and I just wanted to know why you're doing more, why you thought that.
The reason goes back to those fundamental factors that I mentioned, demand supply. We always look at where the demand comes from, where the supply comes from. On the demand side, as you know, 2012 and 13, we had a huge number of investors in the market.
And very many of them, they were actually cash buyers. You know, they were just buying at cap rates of 2 or 3, you know, which doesn't make sense. But basically, they were taking advantage of low prices. Now prices have gone up. You're not going to see as many of them. Not that they're going to disappear. So that component of the demand is not going to be there. Affordability is not going to be as favorable. Interest rates are going to be higher. Income is not growing as fast. On the supply side, we're building more homes. And also, there will be some more listing. So when you look at the supply and demand, we don't know in our model, you know, where I put those arrows, those coming at positive or negative numbers, we don't see how you could justify to get anything more than this. In fact, if you ask me, the tendency, the probability in this number is more to the downside than upside.
And that that demand supply, which I showed at the national level, is even more significant in California relating to the imbalance between demand and supply. But you didn't mention the shift too in the type of homes.
Yes.
Being,
Go ahead.
so the fact that, you know, we have a very high, this last year, higher income homes being sold, it'll still be there, but not as significant a disparity between the two. And that would also tend to reduce prices, not because of any real drop in prices, but simply because of the mix. Other questions? Yes?
Back in 2008, the economic forecast said that it takes approximately the same amount of time to go from the bottom of the stock to the top of the peak of the real estate market, and vice versa. We've obviously reached the bottom of the stock, housing prices recovered. Do you think we're headed for a substantial long-term increase in housing prices?
First of all, I want to say this is a Chapman graduate who remembers what we said in 2008. I'm proud of you. You look at swings, there's nothing scientific about an 8, 10, 20-year swing. There's no reason to believe that we peaked in terms of housing prices, but a major factor that's out there that is limiting price increases is the fact that the rate of inflation has been very low. I mentioned earlier, there's a concern of deflation when you're at around 1%. Inevitably, inflation will return. There's no question. This is, of course, when, but we don't know exactly when. There are no signs now of pending inflationary pressure, but when it does happen, housing prices will be increasing significantly. And that will be the major factor to determine the next major upward swing. What we've had now has been a recovery from incredible lows when the bubble burst. And now we're at a point where affordability, still relatively high, but getting very close to historical norms, which would suggest that for housing to really appreciate significantly in the future, we would have to wait for that next burst of inflation. And it will happen, if for no other reason, to get us out of our pension liability problem that we have in California and the rest of the country. Yes?
In the past few years, you actually showed the demand line for housing and the supply line for housing. And you see in the past that once that supply line improves on the demand line gets above, that's when we have concerns about the bubble. Are we approaching that?
The question to repeat is that last few years I have shown the demand line, the supply line for the housing. And then whenever, of course, that reverses, we're going to see declining home prices. Are we there or not? Actually, again, it's a mixed bag. Jim a little bit talked about national data, which is the same. We have not built enough for population growth. There's no question, even in Orange County and nationally. But the problem, again, goes back. Who's going to buy these homes? Let's say we build 100,000 homes next year. Who's going to buy it? You need real demand. Real demand comes from job creation. And the job creation is not very strong. It's anemic. And as long as job creation runs about 20 to 25,000, assuming household size being about 2.5, so you need about 10,000, and we're building just about right. Now, if we build over more than that, or if job creation gets weakened, then we're going to be out of whack. So we don't see being out of whack, but we think we're getting to a point that further double-digit appreciation is not justified. Now, if for some reason we don't think this tapering, we believe it's going to happen. We believe mortgage rates are going to go higher. But let's say the Fed, Janet comes in yelling and says, no, I want to stick with this, I want to continue buying these long-term mortgage-backed securities, and mortgage rates don't move up as we think. That's going to be helping appreciation and demand. So based on what we put in our model, that's the picture we see. A single digit, roughly about 4 or 5% appreciation.
Yes, back there. Yes.
Last year, I think you had a discussion about the fiscal situation and what could happen, depending on what happened in Washington. Kind of a scary year in terms of the relationship. I believe that you mentioned that there would probably be some changes in taxes or something like that. It sounds like you got a scenario forecast. Can you just give us a little color of your view of what you think?
Yeah, well, the question is, last year, we anticipated, thankfully we did, because that led to the accuracy of our national forecast. We anticipated, the question relates to what's happening on the fiscal side. Did we anticipate it? Yes, we did, and that was that $408 billion swing. Because at that time, we knew taxes were going to increase. We were talking about last November. It wasn't until January that it actually happened. Thankfully, we were able to anticipate not only the tax increase and the level of the increase, but also the decline in expenditures. To a certain extent, we have to do the same thing this year, and we are anticipating, as Essie pointed out in his forecast, another drop in spending when the budget is resolved, hopefully resolved early next year. Now, again, let me point out that we're talking short-run effects. The long-run effect of bringing the budget deficit down is very positive in terms of the economy. As government, it will reduce our debt payments in the future by having a reduced deficit. But that's a long-run effect. And remember what Keynes said, in the long run we're all dead. We're focusing on the short run.
Yeah, just echo on that, and maybe Jim, we should stop after this. What last year we were worried about was fiscal cliff, which was uniform increases in tax rates for all classes of income. That was a huge increase, and that's why we had to spend lots of time. We made some assumption, and Jim said, maybe if we're lucky, we came with $20 billion of estimation. We said 180 billion impact. It was about 200 billion. So this year we don't see anything anywhere close to what was going on. And based on the shutdown that we experienced, actually we're hoping that they would be more civil about approaching it, and reduce the combination of a small reduction in federal spending, but stretched over time rather than short-term bang, and maybe a little increase in taxes. We're going over time, and I think
One more question over here, and then we'll be out and we can get some more.
Okay, last year, you showed a slide that showed the number of people at high level income that were fleeing the state of California because of the high taxation.
Yes.
And attention has gone up more. Did you do something similar this year? Look at it, and how is that going to impact?
Yeah, before I ask the answer, let me say I'm increasingly worried about the fact that you're all remembering what we said. Get it out of your system,
You're absolutely right. If you remember last year, I broke down the income brackets, and then I showed how many filers we had in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 10, 11. We have not received, believe it or not, the 2012 data yet to put it against what we had. But my gut feeling is when we get the data, probably we're going to see the same trend is going to continue. That we're going to see more outflow of population on the higher income bracket than lower bracket. And if you remember last year, I said that's a serious problem that is facing our state and we're not addressing it. The higher income people are providing majority of taxes. The lower income group, there's nothing wrong with it, but it require social services and benefit. And if we lose that higher pool, you can see what's going to happen. We're going to run deficit, maybe again, next cycle, as we go through it. Tom is shaking his head. In all likelihood, we're going to have again deficits, even bigger than what you heard before.
But you notice how Leslie's rushing here to close it? I think he's anxious to go see Lindsay up in LA. Anyway, thank you all.
Thank you very much.